Okay, I'm here at the Fantasy Flight booth with Corey Kineska, and he's going to show us a little bit about how Eldritch Horror works and what a typical turn might look like.
Yeah, so we got Eldritch Horror here, a co-op game for 1 to 8 players. The object of the game is at the start. We choose an ancient one. For our demo, we're doing a Yogg-Sothoth here. This ancient one comes with its own deck of research cards and mystery cards. He's trying to pour into the world through these gates and devour it in horrible, awful ways, and it's up to these investigators, the few people who realize what's going on, to try to stop him. So how do they do that? Well, each ancient one's got these 4 mysteries that relate specifically to him, and these are the missions that you need to accomplish to learn enough about Yogg-Sothoth to seal him away forever, or at least for a week until your next game session. So, let's see here. For example, here is the first mystery we've been demoing, and it says that in order to solve this mystery, you need to research about Yogg-Sothoth 4 times. So, if investigators do that, they'll move on to the next mystery, be the way through winning the game. The Ancient One, on the other hand, he's got a token here on the Doom track. He's slowly going to be advancing each turn based upon the gates that are in play. Gets to 0, he wakes up, awful things happen to the world. We don't want that to happen. So, game's pretty fast. They're just 3 steps to each turn. First is the action phase. Each investigator gets 2 actions. For an action, you can move to an adjacent space. For an action, you can get a travel ticket. You can use travel tickets when you're moving to move 1 extra space along that color. For an action, you can rest to recover some health and sanity. You can also try to acquire assets for an action, and that's how you get new equipment and allies and stuff when you're in a city. We'll come back to that in a minute, I think. Besides that, each character has their own special actions that they can do. After everybody's performed 2 actions, we go to the encounter phase, where everybody draws a card from their location and has a little story about it. Could be something good, could be something bad, usually requires you to perform a test. So everybody gets to have some sort of little narrative, and after we've all done that, we go to the Mythos phase, where we draw a card, and Yogg-Sothoth will do horrible things to all of us. And if we all survive, we'll go back to do another round. So, pretty fast, little downtime, everybody's always moving around. So that's kind of the main actions and what you're trying to do in the game, but on a broader level, let me explain what this other stuff on the game board is here. All of these, all the tokens that are going to show up on the board, these are all things that you can interact with during the encounter phase, whether it's monsters, gates, clues, and they all do something special. So for example, if a character were to move into this space, during the encounter phase, you could try to research about Yogg-Sothoth. And that's when we draw one of these special research cards that will tell you some of the history about Yogg, maybe who's working for Yogg. And if you pass, you'll be able to collect this clue. Now in this particular case, the mystery requires us to research. So each time you get a clue, you can actually place it over here, as long as you're researching. If you do this a number of times equal to the number of players, then you will complete this mystery. Okay. So, players will be trying to do that. The other tokens here on the board, we've got monsters. If you're in a monster space, you have to fight it. During the encounter phase, you just flip it over. It's got some tests that you need to do. Whether you defeat it or not, you just fight 1 round of combat. Any damage that you deal to it that wouldn't actually kill it will stick on it, which means that if 2 players are in the same space, they can gang up on big monsters, or they can fight it over multiple turns. If you kill all the monsters in your space, you can also encounter this space. So, you'll notice each of these locations has kind of some text under them. It tells you what's most likely to happen when you encounter this space. So if he's in Rome, you could have a Rome encounter. Good chance to improve his willpower in Rome. Not always going to happen. Good odds though. There's also this gate here in Rome. Instead of going to Rome itself, you can travel through the gate and try to seal it. And that's when we draw an Otherworld encounter card. And this would have a little story about how he's trying to close the gate. And these encounters are special. First you do the white effect, and if you pass it, you do the center one, and if you fail it, you're going to do the bottom one here. So it is kind of a branching story that you're going to resolve to see if you can close this gate, what awful thing happens to you in this other world. They tend to be pretty challenging, but it's important because gates that are in play during the Mythos phase, there's a chance that they could advance the Doom track. So you'll notice we got this track up here in the corner, the Omen track. That's going to start moving clockwise. Every time this token enters a space, we check the gates on the game board and see which ones match that symbol. Each one that matches that symbol advances it by 1. Okay. So if there were 3 red gates in play, Doom would go up by 3. So it's a big deal to close these gates, not because it's going to help you win the game, but it's going to prevent you from losing it. In addition to that, we have expeditions. This is the expedition token. When you're there, you can go on an expedition in the Amazon, and they're kind of like gates. They've got a prolonged encounter. If you pass this, you'll do the good thing. If you fail, you do the bad thing. Lots of good effects here. You can get artifacts and powerful effects, but they tend to be kind of dangerous. After you complete an expedition, we look at the top of the deck, and that tells us where the next expedition is. Hey, picture the pyramids. Okay. Next expedition is going to be over here. That's a general idea of what we're trying to do in the game. There are a lot of other things that we glossed over or didn't mention. For example, if a character runs out of health or sanity, you knock them over, put a little brain on him, say that he's now insane, that player would get a new character. Somebody could come over here and visit him in the asylum. On the back of his character sheet, he's got a little story about what he tells you, and there's a chance that you can get his clues or his items and whatnot, and then he's going to go away. So there is character death. Mortality is a big deal, but there's no player elimination. One of the final themes of the game is consequence. We've got these condition cards, and these are things that can happen to you that will have some sort of consequence in the future. Like, for example, if you go shopping and you decide, hey, I can't afford anything, I'm going to go into debt to try to get that dynamite, you would get a debt card. It doesn't really say much. It tells you how to get rid of it, but at some point in the future, a Mythos card will tell you to flip this over, and then you will have to pay the price. There's multiple copies of each of these, so you don't know what the consequences of going into debt will be until you flip it over and you're like, hey, look, I'm trying to escape from the local authorities now.
Oh, okay.
So, consequence, mortality, all kind of big themes in this game here.
Right.
And mystery and story, of course.
Cool. Seems like you got a lot of paragraph-driven kind of thing, kind of woven into it.
Yep, a lot of narrative coming from these little stories that you're having. We try to make sure that every turn, each player is going to get to have one of these little stories to kind of advance the narrative of what their character is doing in the world.
Okay. Thanks, Corey.
Yeah, no problem.